Welcome everybody back to another episode of Time Out for Anesthesia, powered by Graphium Health. Probably important for you to know because a lot of the guest people that we're bringing on right now are internal as we continue kind of this series that we've started about Graphium onboarding. And today we have a really special treat for you. Really special because our guest today absolutely hates being recorded and speaking in front of people. And he has very graciously agreed to let us record him. He's also one of the best minds, I think, in our industry. So it's really a special and rare treat for us today. But I'm going to let John Lutz, who you've met before.
Yes.
He is, yeah. Hey, John, how are you?
And just so we're clear, you're not talking about me. Of course, I would echo all of those sentiments. Yes, Matt Oldham is who we're talking about. He is our Vice President of Engineering, and like David said, hands down one of the greatest minds, I don't know, of our industry, but also like I've ever worked with. So I love working with Matt. Mm-hmm. I know that everybody we work with loves working with Matt. Is just outrageously respected by everybody I've ever met. So Matt, we're really warming you up here. I hope you're excited for this.
I'm happy to participate. Thanks for having me today, guys.
Fantastic. So we're gonna dive into a little bit more in depth into the section that we reviewed a couple weeks ago with the onboarding overview, and really dive into some sections that Matt can help us out with. So I'm going to share my screen here, and so we talked earlier in the initial podcast about what this organization is and your facility name. So on this kickoff call that we have with people, this is one of the first things we want to establish. What do you want to call your organization? There's an organization, and below it there are your facilities. And here is where the rubber meets the road. Here's where we're actually going to pull up your incidents. We're going to go through exactly what I call this organization, how many facilities are associated with this onboarding, what you're calling them. So it'd be like a hospital and a surgery center or something like that. We usually do, 2 to maybe 5 at a time. But we've done as many as, gosh, man, I don't know, 100.
100,
one
that's right.
Yeah, we've done a lot in one stint. So, but the usual is 3 to 4 at a time. So anyways, we clarified that on our call. Here's the kickoff meeting call, but really what we're going to focus on today is this client info pack section. And more specifically, Matt's going to talk about the registry. This is one of the first things we send out to people, talk about why it's important and how that helps him set up the instance that he needs. So Matt, do you want me to pull up the spreadsheet here of the registry?
Sure, we can go through the tabs of the registry. That would be helpful.
All right, there we go. So this is what the registry looks like. Explain this to us, Matt.
That's right. So this really is, we call it the registry because it's everything that we need to set up an instance for Graphium and everything we need to know from you as a customer. The first of which, as John mentioned already, is a list of facilities. The facilities where you're going to be using Graphium to capture your anesthesia record. The second tab, the facility information, we just need basic information, right? What is the name of the facility that, as you call it, as you want to have your providers identified in the system so that when they select the facility they're practicing at for a day, for a case, they know what that facility is and they know how to recognize it. And then just the basic demographics for that facility, the address, city, state, zip, and phone. And we also include information about the tax ID number. That's not necessarily the tax ID number for the facility. That's really most relevant when it comes time to report your data for MACRA at the end of the year. And it's not the facility's TIN. Again, it is the tax ID number that the cases from that facility are billed under for your Medicare Part B claims. That's where it becomes relevant. So that's what that tax ID number represents there.
Cool. Fun Easter egg here. I set up this registry with Matt and I put in Chicago because that's where I'm from. And the zip code is the first zip code I lived in, Chicago. So, but these are obviously just sample information. So please delete that out whenever you do your registry. So I'll go to the next tab here.
Yeah, so anesthesia providers, this is obviously an important part. These are the list of your practicing anesthesiologists or CRNAs who are going to be documenting cases in Graphium. And the key information we need to know about each is obviously their first and last name, their NPI number, and what their provider type is. And provider types is going to be an MD, anesthesiologist, or a CRNA. We also need to know which, if you have a provider or if you have multiple facilities that you're actually onboarding in Graphium, we need to know which of those providers practice at which locations, not just the name of a given provider. We need to know which facilities that provider practices at, so that we can then make them available to be selected in an anesthesia record for that facility.
And I think that's a really good one to point out. So you can see, like in the sample here, we have, John Smoot. I don't think I came up with that name, but maybe I was going for Smith and misspelled it. But yeah, so it's interesting. So you have facility 1, John Smoot, and facility 2, John. So basically, like, a provider would be here twice if we're doing 2 facilities. And, if there's 10 providers in facility 1, you'd list those 10 providers, their MPIs, then you'd list them again in facility 2. And right?
That's right. That's exactly
cool,
right.
Perfect. And just to be clear to everybody too, like, this is something that you can do on your own in the instance. What we're doing here and why we're doing it here is that you don't want to load these one by one. We're gonna cover that with you in training and stuff like that so you're gonna add people at a later date. But you don't want to do that one by one. We're going to load them all for you at the beginning. So that's why this list is going to make things a lot easier for you at the beginning.
And it's really both for the anesthesia providers and the surgeon providers. It's usually something that can be pulled out of whatever your credentialing system is, whether it's the facility's credentialing system or whether you have that information in your in some type of system at your practice. Maybe it's your billing software even, where you have that information. But usually there's a system that exists that customers can easily pull this information from.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and we even experimented with doing this in a different format. At least I did at one point. I made this beautiful web form and all this stuff. But everybody understands a spreadsheet, and a spreadsheet is easy to manipulate. So it ended up being that sending a spreadsheet to get all this stuff is just the easiest way to do it, and it's probably pretty quick. So, but anyway, so our next tab here. This is
very similar to the anesthesia providers. We need the surgeon providers, and again, this is specific to each facility. Which surgeons practice there? Which surgeons do you service as an anesthesia provider at that facility? And again, first, last name, the NPI, those are the 3 critical pieces. But for surgeons, we also like to track their specialty. And that's not a critical part of the registry, but it's very valuable because downstream, when you actually start looking at our analytics, you can actually start breaking down your productivity, your efficiency, your quality by surgeon specialty instead of by surgeon name. So you can start really doing some fun and helpful analysis based on the specialty. So we ask you for that too.
Gotcha. Perfect. All right. So the main takeaways: their names, their NPIs, make sure they're in the right facilities for if there are multiple facilities, and of course specialty and MD. Perfect.
Yep.
All right. OR locations.
Yeah, this is an easy one. Just also known as the anesthetizing locations at each facility. So again, this is something that is facility specific. We need to know the abbreviations for each of your surgery locations and a description. So OR1 is operating room 1. Endo 1 is endo suite 1, for example. And a lot of customers, they'll have a lot of rooms, or they'll have a few rooms, or they'll include PACU, or they'll include the emergency department. They'll include pre-op as a location. It's really whatever you need to be able to specify the location for any anesthesia record or out of OR procedure.
Right.
And Matt, I think that's something important, right? Is I'd seem to recall that this is somewhere where people come back after the fact and be like, oh, we forgot to tell you about these anesthetizing locations. Labor and delivery is one that comes to mind. Of a location that sometimes we forget, right? So
that's right. Or maybe you'll have a special room for dental procedures, right? That may not be, something that you're using for anesthesia, but that gets opened up for anesthesia services. Or MRI is another example.
Yeah. Right. So if you're performing anesthesia in a room somewhere, you probably want to include it here. Don't leave it out.
Beautiful. All right, these next sections, lay it on us, Matt. Surgical procedures. Why are these CPT codes important?
Yeah, so these next couple of tabs are really they're related because these are the things that you will specify on the anesthesia record as a provider. But the reason populating these lists in advance is important is is because it makes it easier for the providers at the point of care. So the surgical procedures and the surgical diagnoses, these are your typically what we ask for is your most common procedures for each facility, your most common diagnoses for each facility. Again, surgical procedure, surgical diagnosis, the CPT code, and the description. And so that allows us to pre-populate these lists so that when the anesthesiologist is documenting their record at the point of care, they can click on a list, easily search for, either part of the description, or if they know the code, they can scroll and select the code. But it just makes it a lot easier for them to document their information without having to handwrite it and then make it more difficult for billing, or have to, remember all the codes. They just know this is the procedure that I always do. They can type that description really quickly, key it in, or just speak it using the speech to text recognition that's native to iOS and native to our app. And then they can easily find their code that way. But the other benefit that's really important is downstream when it comes to sending the information about the anesthesia records to the practice or to the billing company or to the billing vendor. These cases, these procedures are already coded so that they can be then imported into the software, and claims can be generated much more easily than the billing company having to transcribe handwriting about the procedure that was done, or having a more labor-intensive coding process for those claims.
Love it. Another example of just how the whole system makes things easier for everybody. Perfect.
Yeah, a little bit of time spent up front makes all the difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so surgical procedures, surgical diagnosis, same kind of deal here. Any other information on this one?
Exactly. No, comorbidities is the same thing, John, and it's again going to be something that is selected on your anesthesia record. So what are your most common comorbidities that you want the anesthesia providers to be able to select on a case? And a comorbidity is not always required, but as the providers who are listening to this know, if you code a case as an ASA 3 or above, you are required to provide a comorbidity in order to generate a claim and have that claim be approved or reimbursed. So that's where comorbidities come into play. And again, this is just the most common ICD-10 codes for the comorbidities that you want to see on your forms.
Perfect. Great. I think that's a great roundup of what this is. Especially I always tell people, like, when we send this out, we go through the spiel that Matt just gave us. I'm glad we're recording it now. We can send this to other people. But if you ever need help with this during the process, obviously we're always there to help people. You send this out and maybe you didn't listen to the first review of this. I'm like, what do you have to do here? And we can always go through this again. We can always help you, because like Matt said, doing this right up front just makes everybody's life easier. So fantastic. Okay, that is these two parts right here. This part right here, this is the registry. We'd assign this to whoever our client is during this. Once that's done, it gets handed off to Matt. He creates that instance. So then you have your corner of the Graphium world. We also load the CPT codes that he was just talking about there. Next in this client info pack section, CPT code reconciliation. This is more of a note that we like to tell people if you're doing macro compliance with this. There is a whole other section where they need to upload CPT codes, after the fact in our system. We will definitely do a whole other podcast on this. We have help pages on this. This is another tool in our system. But Matt, since we have you on there, is there any kind of like 10,000 foot level kind of view about what we're expecting from CPT codes? Uploaded, of course, later on to match up with cases.
No, I mean, the purpose, as you alluded to, is it's all about MACRA. And for any case to be eligible for any given MACRA measure, it has to have a qualifying CPT code, primarily the ASA CPT codes. Those are the ones that are part of a case that actually make a case eligible. Sometimes we need the surgical CPTs as well. Some measures, MACRA measures, require, they have a denominator that specifies a list of ASA CPTs or specific surgical CPTs because the measure is specific to a certain type of procedure that make the case then eligible for MACRA. So we need to get these CPTs at some point in the year. It's best if we can get them throughout the year, because then you can kind of monitor your projected compliance, taking into consideration the actual procedure that was performed and knowing that you're not looking at projected compliance for a bunch of procedures that won't even qualify for the measure. So without the CPT code, we can't know is a case eligible for a measure. So that's what this is all about. So if you come up with a plan up front and you know what it's going to take to get those CPT codes from your billing team back into Graphium, solving that problem sooner rather than later and having a plan is going to make life really easy. And in many cases, we can automate it through an interface. If you have the wherewithal, if you have the resources to do that, that's something we can help with as well.
Gotcha. And like I said, we have a lot of information on our help site. I'll put that link down here at the bottom so you can see that. And of course, we go through this, and then we can also do separate trainings, because we should also probably do a separate podcast about it at some point. So great, thank you. That's fantastic information, Matt. So the next area we have here, we have barcodes. We'll talk about this more maybe with just Frank just a little bit, but it's simple. At this point, we want to get a sample barcode. If you're going to be scanning patients at your site, what we really want to see is that your barcode is the encounter number, because that's what we're going to be pulling out of the barcode. That's what we're going to be getting from the ADT to match things up. Every once in a while, hospitals will have, or facilities will have, special barcodes where they added a little number at the end of it. We just like to know that earlier in case we have to deal with that. So that's why we kind of have that on here twice. At the very beginning, we say, hey, give us a sample barcode if you can. And then later on in the onboarding, we're like, okay, ADT is live now. Send us a live one in an encrypted email. Let's test this before we get on site, and we're like, hey, the barcodes don't work for some reason. Oh, because they add H at the beginning of it for some reason, right? And we need to work around that. So kind of an important part, and something that's really pretty easy to get this part of the onboarding. So great. Yeah, these next couple lines here are pretty boring. I'm kind of glazed by them. This is just paperwork, right? We need a BAA in place. I'm not going to go into that too much. I think most people that are listening to this know what that is, and we could also do another podcast about that if we want to. We send you a BAA. If we need to do your BAA, we can work through what that process is like. We also have a QCDR agreement. This is, again, going back to MACRA. If you do MACRA with us, this is the agreement with the company that we partner with to get this paperwork in place for us sending the macro data to at the end of the year. Again, another Panda doc that I will send out to your main POC here to get this done. Pretty easy stuff. Now for another fun Matt section, and I think this is great. This is the Graphium Health status. I'm going to bring this page up because this is just a wonderful page here. So Matt, lay it on us. What are all these wonderful green bars here?
So green is good always, but the status page is really just what is the status of our platform at any given time, right? So if we have an outage, whether it's planned or unplanned, we have to do maintenance, or as everyone in the world experienced earlier this week, AWS has an outage and it affects us in some way upstream and causes one of our services to be unavailable. We report that here, and then you as a customer, as a user, you can be a provider and user. It can be anybody you want. It can be part of your IT staff. It can be your administration, practice administrators, whoever it is who may be interested and need to know, be made aware of anytime we have a problem with one of our services, we have an outage, or we have a disruption, or we have a degradation of performance, or whatever the case may be. We report that here through our status page. And so you can subscribe to those updates. You can get it via email or text, or Twitter, or RSS, however you want to do that. Yeah. There's a lot of options there, but it lets you know when we have a problem. So when we have scheduled maintenance, we'll post an incident here, a planned incident, and when we have an outage, we'll post an unplanned incident here. You'll get those alerts.
All right. So usually during the onboarding call at this point, like I bring this page up and we'll actually put whoever we're talking with on the phone, they're getting the invite right there, right? So at least we know that at least somebody from the site is on there. But by no means is this exclusive. Anybody at your facility, or anybody you want to know can be on this list to be updated by this. And this is a public site, and a lot of large companies do have this. Actually, Matt was talking about the Amazon issues the other day. I mean, that's something that affected Disney and Netflix and Instacart and all these interesting things. Well, they had a similar page to this, and I was actually pulling it up and kind of watching it all day to watch their little green bars not be green for a while, and how that affects the entire world. So it is kind of interesting, but yeah. So this is a great page, and a great page for people to be involved in and know what it is. So great. Yeah, the last section of this was really pretty simple. I'll just be kind of quick on this. If we're going to be on site with everyone, depending on the site, they may want to know whether or not we have trainings to be in ORs with you, vaccinations, all that kind of stuff. Typically, this is called rep tracks or Secure 3. Different facilities use different things. If this is required at your facility, this is something that we can provide if we're going to be on site, of course. And we'll talk about this a little bit later in training, but usually when we're on site for training, we'll have one person, we'll get there early, we'll do a training with everybody. We'll have done phone trainings beforehand, of course. One person usually stays in the break room, so there are centralized areas so people can come talk to you. And the other person might float around with people going to OR so they can stand next to them while they're doing the first cases. But that's why we have this. We want to make sure that the facility is comfortable with our people being where they need to be in the facility. So again, something we want to get out of the way earlier than later. So that's it. That is the client info pack section of this. And I guess the conclusion
John,
of this particular webinar.
Are there any, before we get off, are there any kind of big pitfalls that you'd love to get rid of? I know a while ago when we're talking about, especially the registry spreadsheet, I know historically we've had some problems with, okay, what's the best way to submit this? We've had people print those off and handwrite them in and then fax them to us.
Don't do that.
Which doesn't help us at all. Are there any other pitfalls that you'd love, just if we could just get rid of this one thing?
Oh man, that is a good question.
And maybe I nailed it. Maybe it's the spreadsheet.
I think it's the spreadsheet. Anything. And I think we experimented with different ways of doing it, and I think we'll continue to experiment. I always want to make this easy for people, but we keep on going back to that spreadsheet. Just because everybody understands the spreadsheet, everybody can put information to your spreadsheet. And even if they get it to us, and please don't do this, and it's a little bit wonky, we can easily manipulate it in a spreadsheet, right? It's such a universal good. So it's, I'd love to see something else. Maybe we could leverage something in the system to actually upload stuff. Like there is definitely that area of self-onboarding, and that would be one of the things. Like, you could go to a web page, one of our help pages, you could download a registry in the format that's correct, put all your information in it, then you can go to our site, upload it yourself, and create your own instance. I think that's definitely some sort of future that we have here pretty soon, and you can see kind of where that goes to. But yeah, that'd be great, and hopefully something sooner than later. I'll ask our VP of engineering when he can have that done.
I mean, speaking of our, I was going to say, Dave. Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, John's exactly right. That is something we want to do. Is, we have very ambitious goals of making onboarding a completely self-service, feature in our platform. And part of that is getting your provider information, your registry information uploaded. But to go back to John's point, there's a lot of information in that, and most likely you would have to upload a spreadsheet. So if you can't get it into a spreadsheet, then you're left to manually entering each one at a time, which is totally possible. That capability exists today. So we want to make it easier. There's only so many ways to make a bunch of data that's easily accessible in a spreadsheet already, easier to work with. But yeah, we do have plans to make onboarding much more self-service, and this is one way we can hopefully streamline it.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah, there's one other section here that I will bring up, actually, since we're not talking about it right now, is vitals integration. There's another registry in a different section that will be added to this. We do a vitals integration with some machines sometimes, and that is a separate registry, if you will. It's a site survey, actually, and we're going to do something separate about that. That's another thing that it's kind of a different service. So outside of the scope of this, but something worthwhile mentioning is another podcast we're going to do pretty soon. But yeah, I think that covers this section for now.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Matt, for being with us today.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure. Always fun working with you guys, and happy to talk about this kind of stuff. It really is.
Is it a pleasure?
It really is. It is.
Well, it is for us. I'm so thankful that you were here today. And John, thank you as always. You're fantastic.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.